This week, I'm super excited because I got to talk with Kellye Garrett about her newest thriller, Missing White Woman. I absolutely devoured this book. If I could have read it in one setting, I think I would have. But it was just so good. The tension through the whole book is insane. It has some of the fun elements of kind of like satirically critiquing true crime culture and our obsession with people who go missing, and the way that sometimes we kind of forget that there are also people too when we're talking about them. It just had so many things going on in it, and I enjoyed reading it so much. But it's about Brianna, who her new boyfriend Ty takes her on a romantic getaway weekend in New York City. He took care of everything: the train tickets, the dinner reservations, the rented 4-story luxury row house in Jersey City with a beautiful view of the Manhattan skyline. But when Bree comes downstairs their final morning, she's shocked. There's a stranger laying dead in the foyer, and Ty is nowhere to be found. A Black woman alone in a new city, Bree is stranded and out of her depth, especially when it becomes clear the dead woman is none other than Janelle Beckett, the missing woman the entire internet has become obsessed with. There's only one person Bree can turn to, her ex-best friend, a lawyer with whom she shares a very complicated past. As the police and a social media mob close in, all looking for #justice for Janelle, Bree realizes the only way she can help Ty or herself is to figure out what really happened that last night. But when people only see what they want to see, can she uncover the truth hiding in plain sight? This was like just such a classically fun missing persons thriller. It has all the things that you love if that is a type of the genre that you really love, while also still bringing up a lot of questions about police and how they pick their suspects and whether that's racially motivated or not. And like I mentioned earlier, the whole true crime obsession that happens online sometimes and what the consequences of that can be in some cases. It's super suspenseful. I was so stressed out with Brianna the whole time I was reading it, and I was so torn on who I thought I could believe in the book, which is a really fun way to experience a thriller, in my opinion. So I just absolutely loved it. I think all of you guys will love it. Before we dive into the book, though, I did want to get to know a little bit more about you as an author. So, when did you know that you wanted to write, or when did you know you wanted to be an author?
When I was 5, I was that annoying person who kind of knew. I just did something yesterday and they were like, "What was the moment?" And I was like, there was like I was 5. There was like no moment. I was just like I just knew. And they're just sometimes you just know things. And
Yeah.
I used to try to like when I got a little older, I always would start stories and I could never finish them.
Hmm.
Still true to this day. Lots of good ideas. The follow through is not great. And so I would have I just got them, from my mother's house, because I've had my stuff at my mom's house for like 20 plus years. So I
Yeah.
finally she made me get them. So I got it back, and it's like this notebook, just the beginnings of stories.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing. I did that when I was growing up. I definitely found a couple like just like legal pads that just had like the beginnings of things that
Yeah.
never ended up going anywhere either.
Mhm.
That's awesome. So then your first books, where like how did that come about? Though with a Hollywood Homicide that you
How
published
far
first?
back? How deep do we want to go with this? Um,
I mean,
I'll give you the was it the TLDR? Is that what they say? So
uh-huh.
basically, I had been working in Hollywood, and on TV writing.
Nice.
Got let go from my job, broke up with my writing partner, and was at like a low point in my career. I was like
Yeah.
early 30s, had no clue what I was doing with my life, and I was dead broke.
Yeah.
And I drove past a billboard one day, Kate, and it was in LA, so it had like offering $10,000 for information on a murder. And like
Hmm.
my first thought, because I was so broke, was I should try to solve that, get the reward money. And then my second thought was my father would kill me, and that's a horrible idea for a life decision. However, I was like, that's a really good idea for a book. And so
Yeah.
that's what the idea for what would eventually become Hollywood Homicide. Like, I don't know, it took me a good like 4 years and 3 book titles later, Hollywood Homicide. So
Yeah. That's cool. It was
yeah.
literally like you're just driving and you're like, that could be a book idea.
Yeah, I
And
get
you were
my
like maybe gonna
inspiration.
solve it.
Yeah, I just get my inspiration from like a lot of mostly like ripped from the headlines, but it's just like
Hmm.
you never know where it's gonna come from.
Yeah. Do you feel like writing in TV like influenced your writing process when you started to write a novel?
It did. There's certain things that I stole. I think there's certain things that I'm really bad at, and I blame TV writing. And there's certain things I'm really good at, and I credit TV writing. So like I'm really bad because with TV writing, I haven't done it in a long time, but I'm pretty sure it's still the same. You have a very set amount of time, like probably like 42, 43 3 minutes with commercials to tell an entire beginning, middle, and end. So there's not a lot of time to waste on like, here's scenery and all this stuff. You have to get to the nitty gritty of it. You got to move
Yeah.
that plot along. You have to use the dialogue because there's no internal thoughts to share what's
Hmm.
going on without making it too obvious. Um, so I think I'm good at plot and I'm good at in my opinion, I'm good at dialogue because of TV. Because good dialogue
Hmm.
is not realistic, it just sounds realistic. Um,
Hmm.
and the thing I took most is with old school television, you had to watch commercials. So the last scene before the end of before the commercial was called the end of the act out. And it always ends on a climactic moment to make people sit through the commercials that you've seen 500 times to
Right.
find out what happens next. And so I just took that and I would do what I call chapter outs. And I try to have each chapter end on a really exciting note. So hopefully whoever's reading is like, I want to stay up and read one more chapter. Like that's the
Yeah.
ultimate, like, for me, like that's the ultimate compliment for hope someone would tell me about my books, but also for someone else's book that I couldn't stop reading it. So that's
Yes.
the goal with my writing. So
Yeah. That actually, I was realizing when I was prepping for this interview that I have talked to multiple authors now who have done screenwriting in
mm-hmm.
some sort
Mm-hmm.
of way, basically. And what you just said makes it make sense why I probably love books from authors who do write that way, because I've been realizing just more like in the last year. I just like love fast paced stuff where like
Same,
stuff really is always happening. Like
same.
that's like the number one reason I start to like consider DNFing a book is like if I just feel like there's just not any like there's just like long pieces of things not happening. So that like that makes a lot of sense.
There are some people who are so good at it and like can just
Yeah.
talk for pages and pages about emotions or the scenery and like
Hmm.
I'm not like honestly and I'm the same where like if I see it in a book I skim or I skip to the like let's skip to the action,
Yes.
and so I'm just not good at it. And even like with describing, I have to remind myself to describe what a place looks like. So there's certain
Yeah.
things I have to work really hard to do that don't come naturally to me. And I think
Yeah.
part of it's me and also part of it's just my background. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, some of with Missing White Woman, I did feel like there was like some of it too was like the scenery you touched on, like it's like near Manhattan, but it is
Mhm.
Jersey City.
Yeah.
Like some of it also like I was just like Googling it because like anytime it takes place somewhere I haven't been, like I end up Googling it. But I feel like it did like give me a good sense of like where basically where Brianna was without
Mhm.
like slowing it down at the same time
Yeah.
too.
Good, because it's interesting because half of the places are real and some are made up. And
Yeah.
I have a good friend who lives in Jersey City, so I would just text her. I remember I
Yeah.
was like, "What's the best place for this to happen?" And she was like, that she immediately responded with this spot. Like, and I was like,
Yes.
okay. And then I walked over to the spot, and I was like, oh,
Yes.
it takes a really long time to go from this spot to get to that spot. And I was like, oh, why do I make that a plot point? So like, there's just certain things I think
Yeah.
you can get with like once you've been to a place and it's real and it kind of inspires me. So
Yeah. I remember reading in your acknowledgments when you were talking about that because I like stopped and like had to tell my husband about it because I love the part where you were like thanking your friend who you had to be like, where's the best place to hide a body in
yeah,
Jersey City? I was
yes.
like, that's amazing.
Like I said, she responded immediately, and I was like, "Okay, great, thank you." And like they
You're
at
like,
this because my uncle is a former police officer, so I would ask him the wildest questions too, and like they're not even like, "Why are you asking?" They just immediately like answer me, and I'm like, "Great, thank
yeah.
you."
That's amazing. You're like, I'm suspicious that you have this answer so
I
fast.
know, right?
So what was like as you started writing, and it may have changed with each book, but what is your writing process like? Like, do you outline or how do you go about it?
I have, if you've gotten emails from me, so you know, like my signature is like I hate writing, I love having written, which is a Dorothy Parker
Yes.
quote. And so I've had that signature for since Gmail's been around, so like 20 plus years.
Uh-huh.
And I literally hate writing, and so the blank page scares me. So
Yeah.
especially when I first started, I would do like 30-page outlines. I think part of that was screenwriting too, because you have to do outlines.
Yeah.
Um, and in each one, I would have 3 act structure, and I would write it. And when I'd get to the third act, I'd throw it out. And that happened for both
Ooh.
Hollywood Homicide and Hollywood Ending.
Mm.
Like a sister too. Like I was like, oh, what I thought was going to happen, now that I know these characters, is not happening. With
Yeah.
Missing White Woman, I did what I think Allison Galen and Valerie Wilson Wesley call like the headlights approach, where I would just figure out just enough that where the headlights reach to. Like, and so I would just
Yeah.
figure out I had the overall idea for the book, but when it came to actual details, I would write and then I'd be like, let me figure out
Mm.
the next section of the book. And so
Yeah.
I don't know if it worked better or worse,
Yeah.
but that just was organically what I used.
Yeah.
Because I did not have a super long outline for
Hmm.
Missing White Woman. I think part of it is because I had sold the book. I had a 2 book deal with my publisher. And when
Hmm.
part of that, I had to give them a synopsis for the second book.
Yeah.
So, so it had to be short. And that's what I
Hmm.
had as a basis. And I was like, okay, I'll just stick with this and then
Hmm.
make it as needed. So,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I read Story Genius by Lisa Cron, and she kind of talks about doing it that way, where like, some of your like major plot points,
mhm.
but then she just recommends outlining like 5 chapters at a time or
Yeah.
5 scenes at a time.
And
And then once
that's,
you get through them, then you think forward. But that makes a lot of sense. I like calling it the headlights approach.
yeah, I stole that from Allison and Valerie.
Yeah, I love it. I feel like that fits really well. Um, what was your inspiration for this book? Like, what hit you for
Oh,
this
okay.
one?
So I think most of my books are ripped from headlines, but this is actually my
Mhm.
own idea. So pat on the back.
Yeah.
It's at a friend's house in Baltimore, and
Mhm.
was doing a writer's retreat, and she was not there. And she had this
Mhm.
beautiful 4-story row house. And I was by myself
Ooh,
on the third floor bedroom, and I have a really overactive imagination. And so I said,
that's
I
good.
could go downstairs tomorrow and find a dead body in the foyer and have no clue how it got there. And her neighbors would be like, who is this woman? Why did you kill someone? And so that is the idea behind Missing White Woman.
Yeah.
I picked it. She's from Baltimore, goes to Jersey. I'm from Jersey. I went to Baltimore, but she comes for a romantic getaway with her
Mhm.
boyfriend to Jersey City. There's this missing blonde, beautiful blonde who's been taking over the internet, who's gone viral. And she comes downstairs one day, and the missing white woman's in the foyer, and her
Yeah.
boyfriend's gone, and she has no idea what happened because she could not hear
Mhm.
anything. So
Yeah. Yeah, I don't wanna get I'm gonna try to avoid spoilers, so that's
I
why
had to.
sometimes it sounds like I don't know what I'm saying, but, um, it was so interesting because you managed to, like, include kind of, like, true crime. You were saying, like, the internet kinda gets obsessed with her, so there's, like, the true crime dynamics of, like, how we follow missing persons cases and, like, maybe the way we lose touch with, like, who they are as people, and then there's also like the racially motivated tension of dealing with the police.
Mhm.
So how did you kind of like I loved how both of those were included in the plot and like added to it emotionally and with like suspense. So how did you approach writing those parts?
So I had always known that I was going to have her be like a missing woman who kind of goes
Mhm.
like missing white woman syndrome is a thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I had known that, but I hadn't thought about how much to focus on the true crime element. And so I kind
Mhm.
of do it through TikTok. There's this one
Yeah.
character in there who is kind of like a TikTok influencer who is also an internet sleuth. And when I was writing the book, unfortunately, Gabby Petito was happening.
Oh yeah.
And I, like everyone else in like in the America, I was really into the case and I was trying to find out what was going on. And one of the sources was TikTok. And there was a couple of TikTokers who would post multiple times a day and they would post every theory.
Mm-hmm.
And it would just be like, every theory was not the correct theory. So like they would like post something. I remember they thought someone had thought they saw the guy who killed her somewhere, and they literally took a photo of him and put it on the internet, and it was not him. And it's like, because the internet is not the police or the lawyers, they don't have the same rules that they have to abide by,
Mm-hmm.
right? To not to falsely accuse people. And so I thought that was interesting how they could just say something, oh, this person did it without any proof or facts. And because they have this huge platform, it was taken as truth. And then like it would be
Mm-hmm.
wrong, and they'd have the next theory, they'd act the exact same way.
Yeah.
And so that's what I want to kind of look at. And I think in terms of racial dynamics, one thing I always say is that I think one of the reasons why domestic suspense does not have a lot of diversity is because the hallmarks of domestic suspense are treated differently for a Black woman versus a white woman. And
Right.
so like the prime example is a missing child. Like if like
Mm-hmm.
if I went and left my baby at the house and went to a party next door,
Mm-hmm.
um, I would be treated differently than if, there would not be a lot of empathy and sympathy for me.
Right.
And so I wanted to say, how do I take the hallmark of the
Mm-hmm.
missing woman, like you think of stuff like Gone Girl, but how do I
Yeah.
also take it from the eyes of a Black woman? Because that's what I write. And
Mm-hmm.
I want to see more of. And so that's where it came from. Like, here's this huge big thing, this syndrome and this woman in viral, but who is it actually affecting? And if it's affecting a
Mm-hmm.
Black woman, how is that going to truly affect her in the ways that would not affect other ethnicities in the
Yeah.
US? So
Yeah. Yeah, you do feel it, especially like from the beginning, like the opening chapter. You feel how like there's an extra, kind of to your point. There's actually like an extra layer of suspense
mm,
just to her like being a Black woman going
yeah,
somewhere where like the neighbors everywhere don't know her. So
right.
like even from the get go, you're like feeling that it's like such a different experience even
Yeah, and
then.
it's so like for a good example, I literally went to my normal grocery store the other day,
Uh huh.
and I was doing self checkout, and the grocery guy comes over, decides to look at like something that has been there forever, like some kind of like flower set or something by my thing, and when I
Mm-hmm.
happened to be putting my stuff in, and I was like, why all
Mm,
of a sudden that's been there for literally all day. When I come and
yeah.
I'm doing self checkout, here you're coming to check on something right next to me when I just happen to be trying to put stuff in and pay. And that's the
Right.
type of thing that it's a microaggression that we
Mm-hmm.
deal with. And it's like, and it's because it's a microaggression, you're kind of like, did he just
Mm-hmm.
happen to be curious at this moment, even though it wasn't early in the morning? At
Yeah.
1 o'clock, he'd been there since 9, and all of a sudden he noticed these flowers and he had to come over. Or
Right.
is it because there were some microaggressions going on because I was a Black
Yeah.
woman? And
Yeah.
so that's just what we deal with.
Yeah. That's what it keeps reminding me. I read The Other Black Girl
Mhm.
earlier
Yeah,
this year, but the epigraph at the beginning is Black history is Black horror. And I was
yeah,
like,
it's strong.
whoa. So
Strong,
every
right?
time I read a book now that's like touching on that, I always think of that quote and I'm like, it does lend itself well to the thriller genre, even though
Yeah.
it's disappointing that it's the truth in real life
Yeah.
as well. So with your characters, I'm trying not to do spoilers here, but I thought it was part of Brianna's backstory makes her like it also makes her a really good lens to see the story through.
Hmm.
Because it basically the tension of her wondering like who did do this, like her
Yeah.
backstory is kind of what makes her even more perfect for that. So how did you develop her character to kind of be the main character for the events that were happening?
Okay. So it might be a spoiler. So if you're listening and you don't want to be spoiled, skip ahead.
Yeah.
Um, but her backstory is that she has been wrongly accused when she was in college of
Hmm.
having drugs during a routine traffic stop.
Hmm.
And literally no one believes her. Even her mother doesn't believe her. The
Yeah.
police don't believe her. Her friends abandon her. And she feels like she's had all these really big dreams, and they all were put on pause because of this one very pivotal moment in her life.
Hmm.
And I find that fascinating, like the justice system, and on a
Mhm.
much bigger note, the idea like you see someone who's like, oh, DNA tests prove that this person who's been in jail for 30 years didn't kill somebody, and then they like
Yeah.
release them and give them like $1 million and expect them to be okay. And it's like
Right.
you're not going to be okay. So I put it
Mhm.
on a much more like a smaller level with her, but I just thought it was interesting to explore that type of person and then
Mhm.
put her in this world where once again, she's has this risk of being falsely accused and she
Mhm.
knows how it could go wrong because it's happened to her. So
Yeah, totally. I felt like it added to the suspense of it as we were reading because, like, I was even torn the whole time I was reading. Where, like, sometimes it's like, I really think it's this way. And then
yeah,
another time I was like, I really think it's that way.
yeah,
But you understand why she's like wanting to actually figure out what happened instead of
yeah.
just assuming it was him.
And I think the tricky thing for me as a writer is you don't want, and this was a, I don't read bad reviews because I had my first bad
I
review
don't
for
blame
Hollywood
you.
Homicide is my character is too stupid to live. And so
Oh, what?
that's could maybe sometimes legit criticism, but I think
Yeah.
with these type of books because they're crime fiction,
Mhm.
yes, they have to be stupid in quotes enough to want to investigate a murder,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
um, but I don't want her to literally be where you're just like you're so stupid, like
Right.
like that's a delicate balance. And I
Mhm.
think maybe sometimes I hit it too hard or not enough, but that balance of understanding why she's doing all of this,
Mhm.
giving her a legitimate reason to do all this. And I
Yeah.
fingers crossed I nailed it. But like
I
someone was
thought you did.
asking me, was like, would you do this? And I was like, no, I would never do any of this crazy
Right.
stuff that I have my characters doing. But like my
Uh-huh.
book would be 2 pages long because it'd be like, oh, there's a dead body in the foyer. Police, okay, bye.
Yes.
Like like my story's over for me. I'll
Yeah.
read it online, but
Yeah.
I don't have a
Well,
book.
it is like the point, you of writing a different character, like, you're
Yeah,
not gonna write yourself every time
exactly.
either as well. Mine would yeah, I saw an author here recently saying that, like, she gets reviews like that too sometimes where it's like, "Why are these characters so stupid?" And she did, like, a kind of like a whole response video where she was like, the characters shouldn't think that they're in a thriller. Like,
Right,
they don't know that, like, how much danger's on the other side. Like, if you want to actually have a character, they're not thinking like, oh, I'm in a horror movie, I
right.
shouldn't do this, or oh, I'm in a thriller, I shouldn't do this.
Yeah.
So it is sometimes it is hard to get the motivation, but I felt the tension of like why Brianna was doing it the whole time. I loved it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So you may have kind of answered the question, but what you've written multiple thrillers. What draws you to writing the thriller genre?
I'm a reader first and foremost, and
Hmm.
I love reading crime fiction. Period. My mom is a huge reader. Um, when I was little, she would give me like full access to her bookshelves. So I was like reading Jackie Collins at like 11, but also I was reading like, Sue Grafton and all these really great, Walter Mosley, all these really great authors who are
Yeah.
crime fiction authors, and I think the, I thought about this the other day. I used to love Encyclopedia Brown. And the great thing
Hmm.
about them is that they're these short stories. And at the end, you have to figure out the answer yourself. Like they're like, what do you think happened?
Yeah.
And I think I kind of like that idea, like me
Hmm.
as someone who's super nosy and curious, want like the idea of figuring it out myself. So I think that that's also the appeal of me
Yeah.
writing books is because I'm literally figuring it out myself. I'm just putting,
While you're writing it.
yeah. So
Yeah, that's awesome though. I've definitely been reading for a long time, but I wasn't reading that as early on, but that's so cool that it carried on from your mom's bookshelf even as well. Um, so I've been asking people here at the end as readers what you've loved that you've read recently.
it's such a tricky thing because
Hmm.
one, it's hard for me to read as I write because I tend to mimic people.
Yeah. Yeah, I've
Um,
had people say that.
yeah, and then also I'm lucky that I get asked to do blurbs a lot, so I'm
Oh,
reading
nice.
things that are ahead. Like I'm reading things that are coming out this year.
Yeah.
Two, I liked Amina Akhtar's book, Almost Surely Dead, which came out earlier
Yes.
this year. I read it, it got me over a reading slump. I read it in one night. And then
Mm-hmm.
two that are coming out later this year. Wanda Morris has a new book coming
Mm-hmm.
out in the summer, and so does Yasmin Ongo, and they were both like Black women who write thrillers.
Yeah.
Like both of those.
I'm
I'm trying
so
to think what
excited for Yasmin's.
I know she does. She's always been doing like she had the series, and then
Yes.
now she's going to domestic suspense, and she doesn't miss a
Mm-hmm.
beat with it, so it's exciting. I think it comes out
July,
September,
maybe?
September. No, somewhere, yeah,
I
somewhere
can't
around
remember.
September. Yeah.
I know I requested it on NetGalley, and then yeah, I had her on. I think she's been on for all three of the Nina Knight. Yeah, all
Oh,
three of the
great.
Nina Knight ones. So oh my gosh, I loved the Nina Knight ones. Those are like still some of my
She's
favorite spy
so good
thrillers.
at writing like action and creating really
Yeah,
interesting backstories, and like
yeah,
I'm good friends with her, but so she's such a positive, sweet, like nice, fun person, and you're like,
yes.
how are you writing all of this like
I
dark
know.
stuff, like action scenes? And I'm like, I
Yes,
can see like the last person, but she's so good at it.
I know. She said when I interviewed her about it, she said that like she'll be in her like office where she writes and just like gets up and starts like blocking it off and like doing weird stuff and her kids walk by and they're like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "I'm
Aw.
writing." But yeah, I love it. She's so good at action. I couldn't put any of those books down. Those are
Yeah.
some
And
of my
as someone
favorite
who my
ones.
climaxes always suck, and I had literally had my editor be like, "This needs to be a lot better." I can appreciate someone who can write good action and climactic scenes. So
Yes. Yeah. I loved Omina's this year too. Almost Surely Dead. It was so creepy and scary and
yeah,
thrilling. It was just like so many things together in one. And it had that same like true crime kind of
yeah, the
commentary
podcast.
with podcast form.
Yeah,
Yeah. I loved it so much. So good. Um, where can people follow you to stay up to date with what you're working on?
I am the last person still on Twitter, so I'm on Twitter still, acting like it's okay over there. Um, I'm on Instagram, and it's all so I have a college nickname, Kelly Cal, that
Hmm.
rewriting books I thought would be a really cute name for all my social media. So even though now I'm
Yeah,
like 45 and have 4 books out, I'm still Kelly Cal on
it
everything. So
works.
KELLYEKELL. So that's
Hmm.
Twitter, Instagram. That's my personal Facebook too. So you can just follow me there.
Hmm.
I'm not on the TikTok. I'm just not
Yeah.
a visual, like I'm not a video person. Like I like
Hmm.
watching games, but the idea of
Yeah.
having to do them freaks me out. And I'm
Hmm.
at the point in my life if something freaks me out, I'm not doing it. So
Yeah, I
I'm not
get it.
on the TikTok. I have like 2 videos
Hmm.
that my 7-year-old niece edited for me. And
Oh,
but just Instagram and basically Twitter are the best.
yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, TikTok is a whole other thing, but I love
It,
scrolling it for sure.
I mean, some people are so good at it, and
Yeah.
I admire that, but I just know I have to kind of look at the benefits of it, this like the
Hmm.
reach versus this just the stress of it. And even like right now thinking of the idea of having to put, because I would want to do a good one, right, like create
Hmm.
like a really good TikTok freaks
Yeah.
me out, and so I'm just not gonna
Yeah.
do it. And I feel bad because I know it's such a great place to find really good books, so
Yeah.
but I'm not doing
Bookstagram is good too, though. So you're
it.
there.
And even my Bookstagram, I don't like my Bookstagram is not as curated as I feel like other people's are, that I'm a little
Yeah.
jealous of. But again, it's like I do a lot of stuff, and the
Hmm.
idea of trying to curate that just stresses me out. So
I get it. Yeah.
just to get some
I every
selfies.
now and then I'm like, I'll have a theme, and then I like end up switching it
Yeah,
anyway, and I'm
and
like,
I
whatever.
admire the folks who do it so well. I just know, like,
Yes.
I'm like, you're just gonna get some selfies from me and some really crooked pictures of the book.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
sometimes
Yeah.
both together.
Right. That's pretty much mine too. Well, I will put all those links in the show notes so that everyone can find you there really easily. And thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Of course, Kate. I'm super excited to be here and for your podcast.